So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a sit down, which I haven't been doing recently at all for board games. I have been doing quite a lot of sit downs for various areas from the role playing game community, rules, playthroughs, even, and scenario books. But today I'm going to talk about a board game. In this particular case, it's the Apocrypha adventure card game by Lone Shark Games, and the creator is Mike Selinker. I'm quite surprised myself that I am doing the sit down because I was kind of excited when I first heard about the game way back when the P&P version was available as a kind of preview teaser thing on Board Game Geek, and I downloaded it and I created the cards, and I actually did a couple of videos on my channel for this P&P, and I backed the Kickstarter, and it was actually quite expensive, €160 including shipment, which is quite a lot to pay out for a game that you haven't seen yet. I mean, the P&P I thought was a nice idea because it gave you quite a good idea of what the game was going to be like. And also, of course, it is by the same group of people, or at least Mike Selinker, who created the Pathfinder adventure card game, and it does share some of its mechanics. Now, the PACG is a game that I absolutely hate. I only have one box set of the first run because obviously there's now a new thing out, and some people call it a second edition. Other people say it's not a second edition. And it's called Wrath of the Righteous. And I was so disgusted with the game that I stopped playing in the middle. And I never bought all of the expansions, which was quite a thing to do back then because I was still a completionist. But I couldn't get myself to even spend the £12 per one of those, or £15 per one of those expansion packs, because I just felt it was such a bad game that I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. But of course, I had already paid for the Apocrypha card game, and I had serious misgivings about this because I knew that the two of them shared several mechanics. And so another thing happened, and that was that the game was delayed and delayed and delayed. And then and I'd completely forgotten about it. Not that it existed or that I had pledged for it, but I'd completely lost interest. And then I saw one day people complaining about the fact that apparently at one Gen Con or something, the game was for sale. And they had boxes there that people could go and purchase, although the Kickstarters hadn't been fulfilled. And a lot of people got very angry. I was beyond emotional at this stage, so I was just like, yeah, well, that sucks, but you know. And then when I got the box, the first one, The World, I just put it on a shelf and didn't look at it again. And then suddenly last year, I got another package and it contained 2 more boxes. And again, I just put them into the hot press, and I ignored them completely. I didn't do anything with them. And then this year, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, suddenly, I can't even remember what made me go for it, but it was a video that I saw on YouTube. And I was like, okay, you know what? You've been doing so much in the RPG community, playing, running games, doing videos and reviews. Maybe you should go back to your roots and do some board gaming. And so for some reason, I remember what it was. I saw that there was this new version of the Pathfinder adventure card game. And the person who was playing it also has a channel where he plays the Apocrypha adventure card game. And his name is Kevin. And the YouTube channel is The Liching Hour, which I highly recommend. It's a great, great channel. And so I was like, okay, well, how about, this looks interesting. How about you give it a chance? So I broke out my copy. I did an unboxing. I sleeved all the cards from the box 1, and I got stuck in. And the first thing I noticed, and I have to agree with everyone who's criticized this, is that the rules are atrociously written. They are incomplete, they are unclear, and they are simply terrible. However, this didn't deter me, because I was like, yeah, well, you can do this. You play Chits and Counter, you play Hex and Counter war games, SGBOH rules are terrible too, and you've managed those. So you will be able to play this game. So I did. And the misgivings that I kept feeling about the adventure card game for Pathfinder simply didn't happen. I was actually enjoying this. But then I realized that there was a second set of rules online, and I downloaded those, and I realized that I'd been making quite a lot of mistakes and errors. And the errors were basically due to the fact that the way it should have been played wasn't explained in the rules at all. And so I had to redo the whole Candle Point mission set. So I've just completed the last one. And it means that I have played 16 scenarios so far. Well, not 16 different scenarios, but I've played 16 times. And I've played 9 scenarios in total. And they are all from the Box One, The World. They are all the Candle Point missions, for those of you who know the game. These are the introductory missions, where you only have the base cards. But I think it gives me enough of an insight into the game itself to do a sit-down. And I'd like to start with a negative, and I've already done that. The rules suck. So now that this is out of the way, let's look at the game itself. What is the game? Well, I was thinking about how to describe it best, and I think one way of describing it is that it's a randomized card acquisition deck constructor with mitigated dice-based confrontation mechanics. So this is what actually happens in the game. From a thematical point of view, it is a mixture, I want to say, between the X-Files, Lovecraftian horror, to a lesser degree, and apocalyptic, world-ending religious stuff. And each player, or if you play as a single player and you want to play with multiple hands, is represented by an avatar named a saint. Those avatars are actually named, so they're not just generic avatars like you find them in the Legendary Encounters Alien box, where you have, like, the medic or the soldier or whatever, but they are actually named avatars. And each avatar has 4 virtues. They're always the same. It's mind, body, rage, and soul. And they have different values in each of those virtues, ranging from 1 to 4. And they also indicate how many dice you would roll if you were to invoke this virtue to fulfill a task. They also have skills, for example, hack, sense, charm, study, which you can also use under certain circumstances to add dice to your dice pool. And they also have powers. So far in the base game, everyone has 2 powers. And they are quite different and useful to different degrees. At the moment, I'm playing with 3 people: Gabriela Vargas, Alice Moon, and Ruby Doomsday. And I've used Gabriela Vargas's 2 powers. I've used one of the powers of Alice Moon, and I've used none of the powers of Ruby Doomsday in 16 playthroughs. So obviously Ruby Doomsday's powers are a lot less useful at the moment in the base game, Candlepoint missions, than, let's say, the checking out of upcoming cards power that Alice Moon has, or the move and take somebody with you, or when somebody else moves, go with them power, or the add 1 to a die roll power of Gabriela Vargas. And basically, each mission has a story. And to my mind, the story shines through a lot more in this game than it ever did in anything of the PACG games. While it's not a role-playing game at all. And while it's not a storytelling game out of the box, these stories that kind of are written down, they're written down very, very briefly though, make a lot more of an atmospheric impact on me. And you can take them to great lengths. So if you ever check out the Liching Hour, and I think you should, you will see somebody using the game, going through the missions and building a whole story around them. It's like really somebody using the card game and all of its rules and the pre-fabricated missions to come up with his great storytelling narrative, which I really love. I love listening to him. It's just so entertaining and it's just so well thought out. But to me, it's for some reason not even that necessary. I'm just happy to just play through the game, and the mechanics fade into the background and I'm just experiencing the cards. Now, the fact that I've played 16 missions just with the base set of cards, and I still haven't seen every single card. I know this because the other day when I was putting sleeves on them, I saw cards that I haven't encountered in-game at all so far. Goes to show that there is a lot of variety in there. And it doesn't get old. The artwork, in my opinion, is very good. I really like it. I'm really happy about the artwork. It's very evocative. It gives you this sometimes terrifying feel, this forlorn feel, this kind of not quite there feel, or this there is something off here feel. And it just gels well with the story that the game is trying to tell. If you really need a lot of storytelling, this is not the game for you. Then I would say you should preferably play Eldritch Horror, because there is more of a story there. But if you are really into card games, then I think, and if you like the story aspect, and if you like the theme, because the theme does have horror elements. It is actually sometimes quite gruesome, the stories that are being told. You should definitely go for this. From a complexity perspective, I would say it is moderately complex, but a lot of the complexity is not due to the mechanics, of which there are many, and you just have to remember them. But it's because the rules are written atrociously badly. But once you have read the online rules, and once you've realized a couple of pitfalls, and once you've also realized how to interpret the wording on some of the cards, you will be able to play the game very, very quickly and fluidly. So the mechanics don't get in the way. The game is randomized. So unlike a deck builder, for example, Thunderstone Advance, one that I have played, or also the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle deck builder, where you have an offering, or legendary encounters, alien as well, from which you can buy cards. Here, and you can basically plan ahead, and you can say, okay, so there are 6 cards available and to buy, and I know these 3 or 4 would be very relevant to my character. You can't pre-plan this because you don't know what offering will be sprung upon you, because that's completely randomized. You can tell for each location what type of card you will encounter, because it says so on the card. So you might see 3 soul gifts and 1 body gift. And you know that there are no rage gifts in there and no mind gifts. But what gifts you will encounter is not known up until such time as you actually encounter the card, and then you can try and acquire it. And again, that is mitigated dice pool luck-based rolling. So again, that's something that you need to take into account, that you might end up with spending cards to gain another card and then not gain it after all. And that's where it can become quite a bit annoying and frustrating, because your draw deck is your life, just like in the Pathfinder Adventure card game. Once you are supposed to draw a card and you can't, you start to fade and you gain a death condition, which you can then, if you lose the mission as a team, then this death will become permanent for you. And if you ever gain 9 death conditions altogether, you're dead. You're dead. Interestingly enough, that was the mechanic that I hated most about the Pathfinder Adventure card game. Well, it is actually, this is the core mechanic of the PACG. There isn't any other mechanics in there. And it's just terrible. And I really, really hated it because either the die rolling is so skewed in the Wrath of the Righteous that it's actually too difficult, or mostly too difficult, to acquire the cards, in which case it's badly designed, and I will say that. Or I was absolutely extremely unlucky, which is highly unlikely because based on the laws of probability, that shouldn't have happened. But I recall spending so much time building my dice pool and trying everything and then not getting the card, or being forced to sacrifice a card, i.e. putting it back in the box and not being able to get it again unless you encounter it again at some later time randomly from a location or in a location. That I just couldn't continue playing it. The same is the case here. So you start out with a deck of cards, which is pre-built. So they make suggestions as to which cards your saint, that's what the avatars are called, should have, and which makes thematic sense for this particular person. And then you go through the nexuses, which is another word for location, and you encounter cards and you can try to acquire them, and if they are threats, then you have to defeat them. And once you have finished a mission, you will have a certain number of gifts. These are the cards that you can use. Those are the player cards. And these gifts you can choose from to reconstruct each person's deck. So you might have acquired new cards that you like and that you would like to incorporate, so you can do this, but everybody only ever has 11 cards, at least in the base game. I believe that later on it is possible to permanently get more cards, but in the base game, this is what you get. You get 11 cards for your base deck, for your deck. You can't go over those, plus 4 omens, so 11 gifts. Now, you might start with a mind gift that is one of the alpha cards, so those are the beginner cards, if you like. And it might not be such a great one, but over the course of your mission, you acquired a really lovely body gift, and you can then keep this. However, once you have constructed the decks for all of your saints between games, any card that you have acquired, or any card that was still in your possession at the end of the game that you're not using, goes back in the box. You cannot say, oh, I just dive into the box and I take the gifts that I want. So it's not like the Lord of the Rings LCG, where you have, depending on the expansions you've bought, hundreds of player cards that you can put together into a deck. Taking into account certain restrictions. I mean, you can't have more than 3 copies of one card per player. And other things also may pose restrictions on you. But usually you have all of these cards at your disposal to build a viable deck. That's not the case here. You have a box full of cards, but you cannot just randomly access them and say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, willy-nilly. But you really have to get them during the game. Somehow. Usually you acquire them by rolling dice against a particular value, using your virtues, your skills, using other cards. Sometimes you just get them as a reward or as a side effect. For example, there's a threat called Stash, and if you overcome that threat, you get to randomly pick one gift for each of the virtues, so you end up with 4 gifts, and you can choose one to keep, and the other ones you may, but you don't have to, put into the location that you're at, and then you can encounter them later on if you so choose. But other than that, the available cards that you can use in your game is limited, and you can lose cards, and you can lose them permanently. Even sometimes cards get stashed and then they cannot be regained. Mostly, however, they are sacrificed, which means they go back in the box and can be randomly drawn when you build the next nexuses for your next game. That may sound complicated, but it's actually very straightforward, but it does mean that you're limited in your ability to buff, as it were, your character. Because, you know, if you come across a really cool card and you can't win it, then you can't get it, and that's it. But I like it because it kind of reminds me of real life. We can't just get everything we see simply because we're sometimes not able to afford it. We don't have the money, or we weren't there at the time when it was on sale, you know, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, this is what you do. You go from nexus to nexus, you encounter cards. Interestingly enough, you encounter the threats. They kind of build the story. So the gifts are just, byproducts that you also encounter, but it's mainly about the threats, your antagonists that are trying to take over the world and probably bring about humanity's demise. And you and your choir of saints are trying to stem the tide of evildoers. That's what this is about. And the monsters are very interesting and very colorful and very varied. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but in the base box, you also encounter the skinwalkers, and they are essentially lycanthropes. So they are werewolves. But then there's also a book of golems where you run into computerized things, you run into AI, you run into robots, you run into mechanized cars and drones. And then there's also the book of physicians where you run into doctors that try to, take over the world or whatnot. So it is very varied, and some of this is a bit disturbing, I have to say. With regard to character progression, because you know this from the PACG, where you can basically level up your character, then you can either add dice or increase the amount of dice you may roll, or add certain abilities. This is not the case. You cannot actually change the makeup of your saint. So it's a lot less role-play than the PACG. However, what you do get are fragments. Fleeting memory fragments and enduring memory fragments. And these are cards that you gather if you win a mission. Again, they are randomly distributed. And you can pick them and put them into your halo. So the halo is actually, if you put your character card in the middle, then you have 8 halo slots around it, 3 at the bottom, 3 at the top, and 1 to each side of your character card. And you use these as special powers. The fleeting fragments are one-time use only. And they are very powerful cards. And then you have the enduring fragments. I have not encountered any of those yet, because in the Candle Point missions you don't get them. But these are fragments that stay with you. Memory fragments of a former life, or maybe former existence, or your actual life, but things that you have forgotten as your saint. And they also give you powers that you can use to battle the forces of evil. And so you go through the boxes, and I have to say I'm having a blast. And I am actually surprised at how much I'm enjoying this game, considering that I really hated the PACG. But this game is just so much better. And I would also like to add some personal remarks, because I'm a lady gamer. And unfortunately, it's difficult to look at gaming without taking gender into account. We all know that, we all know about the awkward stories that women tell when they go into a gaming store and get, and they meet those weird people who believe that they know everything better, and they always are men, and, all of that kind of crap that we have to put up with. But also, what has always gotten me since I was a child was that I never felt represented. I was always interested in playing adventure games, RPGs, computer games, and I remember in the oldest computer games that I was playing, there were no female characters. So, I wasn't represented. I had to play Beedle the Bard because Barbarella the Bard wasn't available. So, apologies to J.K. Rowling, because obviously she is somebody who has done a lot for representing females in literature. But the other day I came across something called the Bechtel-Wallace test. This test deals with, or is a test that you can use to find out how many women are represented in literature, in a particular work of literature, and the overall representation of women in literature. Now, one thing that I noticed about the Apocrypha adventure card game, and I sat down last night and I did a count just to be safe, was the base game comes with 10 playable characters, 10 avatars, 10 saints. Not 4 of them are women, not 5 of them are women, but 6 of them are women. 6 women of different ages. You have young children. Well, I would say Ruby Doomsday is probably 16. You have, like, you know, the graduate, that would be Alice Moon, to the grandmother, who's actually the best grandmother in the world. It says so on her t-shirt. You have also, so first of all, you have 6 women and 4 men. That's 60% women, which is incredible. I've never seen a game where this is the case, where I've seen more women avatars than men. Generally, looking at the artwork, you have men and women, I would say, almost equally represented, both as heroes as well as villains. So it's not just that the men are the evil guys and the women are the nice guys. On the contrary, some of the true threats are actually women. The Gorilla, for example, or Crystal Mephistopheles are women. And on the artwork in general, where it's about gifts, for example, where you do see men or women, or men's hands and women's hands, you see both equally distributed. There I didn't do a count, but I did notice that women are very well represented in this game. I am not sure if this was intentional, that they said, okay, we do want to make a statement here. If it was, congratulations, you've made a statement, and I've heard it loud and clear. If it was not intentional, but if it was just how they run and how they do things, again, I take my hat off to you, because then you've reached a level of being inclusive in gaming that most other companies will probably never achieve. But I was very, very impressed with it. I am very impressed with it, which is why I want to point it out directly and be absolutely clear that people hear this. It is very, very interesting to see this level of inclusivity, both gender as well as age. Like I said, in the girls department, you've got young girls and older ladies who are grandmothers, which I think is awesome. You have women in all walks of life, the student, the graduate, the doctor, etc. So women are really represented. And I really, really like it in that both men and women are represented in very diverse roles. And I think that this is really awesome. And I really like that somebody would do that. Because when it came to this, I think they must have thought about it to some degree. And they must have made conscious decision around this. So what is my verdict around this game? Well, like I said in the very beginning, I'm surprised that I'm enjoying it this much. I'm loving this game. I have to say that I'm a bit shocked at myself that I really missed out on this game for 2 years while it was sitting in my games room on a shelf, completely ignored. But I'm making up for this now, and I'm playing it on a daily basis, and I'm really enjoying myself. I know that it's gotten a lot of bad press. People seem to dislike it, but I'm still waiting for a good reason why they dislike it. But then again, I do dislike the PACG, and I know lots of people love the game and totally love it. So I suppose it really depends on if you can get behind the mechanics, which are randomized. It's a very random game because you will be rolling dice, but the die rolling is a lot less random than in the PACG because you have so many ways of mitigating die rolls even after the fact. And since you're rolling d6s, chances to get good rolls are a lot higher than if you're rolling d12s because, getting a really high roll on a d12, anything from 8 upwards is, quite unlikely. And I remember rolling 2 d12s and ending up with double 2s every single time, and there is nothing really that I could do, and it was terrible. So I have heard that some people say the game is too easy. I know that there were instances when I felt, oh, this is really easy. Looking back on it, I realized that I was playing it wrongly. But then again, there were instances where I knew I was playing it right and correctly, but it was easy. However, it's the introductory candlepoint missions. Also, I believe that it does make a difference how many you run. I'm running 3, and I think that 3 is probably on the cusp, because when you play with 4 players, you get more locations. But if you play with fewer players, it gets a little more difficult, because sometimes you have a mission which simply says if you have 1 player or more, you get 4 locations. And then only if you have 4 or more do you get the 5th location. So if you play with only 1 player or 1 avatar, you would be looking at 4 locations. And if you have 2 players, you would be looking at 4 locations. The same with 3. So, of course, if you have 3 people trying to investigate 4 locations, that's a lot easier than just 1 or 2 people, or 1 or 2 avatars. So I am totally planning on taking 2 more investigators and run them as a duo and go through the missions to see how they play. I think it's going to be a lot tougher, because that's actually what Kevin from the Liching Hour is doing. But also considering that they all have very different powers and very different abilities when it comes to their virtues and what they can and can't do, it is going to come up as a very different play through, because it's going to feel very different. So there's your answer to how replayable is it. I think it's highly replayable, because you would be using different people, I guess, if you played it a second time or third or fourth time, because there are plenty of investigators in there, or saints, that you can make differences, and they really, really feel different. They really do. So that's all from me, from Chits and Cats. I hope you enjoyed this. If you are interested, Apocrypha at the moment sells for under £30, the base game, on amazon.co.uk. I really think you should check it out. If you're unsure, please go and visit the Liching Hour, or go to my channel and look at some of the playthroughs. They will give you an idea of the artwork. They will give you an idea of how the game plays. And if you look at Kevin's videos, you will hear a story that's being told, and that's also very entertaining. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.